Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And very good morning to everyone who has attended the session. Today, we are very grateful to have once again our distinguished scholar, Dr. Eric Winkle, visiting fellow from IAS Malaysia, as well as visiting fellow UN Center for Civilizational Dialogue. And inshallah, I'm very happy to be the moderator for this session. And we will have a very special lecture on communication through imagery, exploring a visual language for humanity. Okay, before I start, I would like to welcome once again everyone, the beautiful people here, scholars, professors, and all the people who like to join this session, which will be delivered by Dr. Eric. And before we begin, I would like to introduce our speakers, and perhaps you already know the background of the Dr. Eric, but then I would like to briefly introduce him again. And as we know, Dr. Eric has been translating and elucidating Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, the 13th century Arabic work of over 10,000 pages. And he was a founding faculty member of the International Islamic University in Malaysia and senior fellow at the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies. His studies have led him to explorations of pre-intellectual understandings of the divine creation, discovering the universal in the particular. And he seeks to restore wholeness to the intellectual division of disciplines and knowledge through an appreciation of what was called natural philosophy, the study of what we now separate as science and humanities. And after 90 hours of sessions around the concepts in the Futuhat on YouTube in 2020 to 2021, Dr. Eric has worked with an artist of the creative imagination to produce his magnum opus, an illustrated guide to Ibn Arabi. And if you like to get further information, you may visit the website, thefutuhat.com. Okay, throughout 2020, this illustrated guide has been for translations in Spanish, Bahasa Indonesia, and German, and has inspired communities to host the Futuhat for explorations of the creative imagination in Indonesia, Morocco, Cambridge, Oxford, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and all over the world. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Eric to share with us the wisdom and the beautiful messages that we have in this topic, communication through imagery, exploring a visual language for humanity.
Thank you very much. So, greetings, everyone. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So looking at communication through imagery. So let's talk about eyes and the mind. So the eyes, Ibn Arabi tells us that the eyes see everything and they never lie. They always receive the data correctly. But the mind interprets, and the mind can interpret in a wrong way and in a right way. So if you think about the optical illusions, so the optical illusion is when you look at something and your eye sees all the data, sees all the images, but the mind has to decide what the eye is looking at. So the mind has to decide. And so in an optical illusion, you see either this or that, depending on what your mind sees for you. So that's an example of how the mind limits and constricts what the information that the eye has found. So we're looking right now, we want to see how the mind constricts and how the eyes and then the heart can see more and can see all. So we'll start here with this poem and that Ibn Arabi wrote about investing the hirqa, which is the cloak of honor, on a young woman, a young girl. And we'll end with this as well. So I'll try to show you as a circle how the how the message that Ibn Arabi wants to convey is conveyed. So he writes, and he writes this poem: I invested my daughter Satri with a cloak from the family of beautiful manners. I clothed her with the clothing of God awareness, based on every creation, inducing wonder. And I said, my daughter, travel with me on my path and with my course. The course is the law of the prophet, the Hashemi, the Arabi. This is how I clothed her with the cloak, based on every generous chosen teacher. I declare this, and I am Muhammad ibn al-Arabi. So this is the conveying of the secret that he is told to convey in this huge work called the Futuhat al-Makkiyah. So the Futuhat al-Makkiyah is 10,000 manuscript pages. And in my translation would be, inshallah, 12,000 pages of translation and commentary. And this has been conveyed by the manuscript, and it's been conveyed by these girls and women and a freed male slave. They have conveyed this message. And the message Ibn Arabi was told to convey can be spoken of as, tell my creatures, the ones that I created, tell my creatures that I am near. So that's the message that the entire Futuhat is designed and written and created in order to convey. And so he conveyed this in writing, and then he conveyed it through this investiture of these cloaks, of the sacred cloaks. And so what he invested was conveyed. So there's a difference then between 12,000 pages and something that a young girl can convey. And so what the young girl conveys is she was hearing with her heart, and the rest of us get this conveyance by reading with our eyes. So the optical illusion is an example of when the eyes pick up something and then the mind has to interpret. We also have a situation where if someone needs to find out something that they saw last week or last month, and they want to really understand, they can't remember what they saw. Sometimes they can be put into hypnosis, and they'll be able to go back and see what their eyes could see, which the mind had ignored. So the mind restricted and limited what was being seen, but under hypnosis, you can get the information that the eye was bringing that's beyond what the mind limited. Ibn Arabi's image of this is when you're on a ship going along the shore and you see someone walking. The person is walking forward just the same direction you're going, but because the ship is maybe going faster, the person walking looks like they're going backwards because they're never catching up and they're slowing down. And so he says the eye is correct. The eye sees what's happening. And the mind has to say either, well, the person's walking backwards, or the mind says, no, it's because we're moving this way and they're moving slower. That's why it looks like they're going slower. There's also a story that struck me. There was someone was hit by a train. He was crossing the train tracks with his car, and he got hit by a train. And this was a place very much in a rural, empty area. And so every day he would come to the train tracks and he would look left and he would look right and he would see no train. And so he crosses. Next day he looks left, he looks right, he sees no train, he crosses. And after doing this for years, at one point he comes in to the tracks, looks left, looks right, and the train hits him. And why does that happen? Because for many years, every time he's looked left and looked right, he's never seen a train. So because he's never seen his train, his brain, his mind says there is no train. So when he comes that day, the fatal day, the brain says there's no train, and he gets hit. So the eyes knew that the train was coming, but the mind could not understand it. So when we're looking at this as in philosophy, it's called cognitive dissonance. And so when your eyes see something and the mind can't understand it, that's a cognitive dissonance. So the first example that was given decades ago when this phenomena was being looked at was like on playing cards. So you had like the 10 of hearts, and you would see the 10 of hearts, and then you would see the 8 of hearts, the 6 of clubs, the 5 of spades. You would see all these different cards. And then they would make some unusual cards. They would put the 10 of hearts, but instead of a red heart, it would be black. And then the 5 of spades would actually be shaped like a heart. So what happens is that you keep giving these cards to the person and they keep saying 5 of spades, 10 of hearts, and they keep reading this. And at one point, their mind starts saying, wait a second, was that a spade or a heart because it was black or red? And so at some point, the mind says, there's a dissonance, there's some problem with what I'm understanding here. So that dissonance is very helpful because it tells the mind to start being quiet and let the heart speak up, because the heart is seeing that this is a card and sees what it is without immediately putting a category onto it. So this is how the eye and the mind work. And we are so much used to working with the mind. So we actually don't see what's out there. We see what our mind expects us to see. And the mind quickly interprets, limits, and excludes things that don't really make sense, and then shows us what we expect to see. Whereas the eye sees something different. So this is, you think about in human relationships, you look at someone and your mind might immediately start characterizing them, categorizing them, classifying them into, well, this person is X, Y, Z. And then the mind is saying that's what it is. And the person may be different and may be doing things that are opposite and that would cause dissonance. But you may still, the mind is very powerful and says, no, that was an exception. This is where the person really is. And then he's really a mean person. And then when they're nice to you, you say, no, he's really a mean person. How often they have to be nice to you to say, wait a second, maybe I need to change my mind's idea of whether this person is a nice person or a mean person. So this is what the mind, the eye, the issue becomes. And so to explore this communication through images is to explore images that the eye and the heart see, and then to bypass the mind or tell the mind that your categorizations are not going to be adequate. So to give a feel for this, I wanted to read 2 passages from Ibn Arabi. And I think if you've heard about Ibn Arabi, you may be surprised that this is actually how the Futuhat is written and what's happening inside this amazing book. So this is a story that Ibn Arabi is telling about Mother Earth. And he is saying that when the people who are the ones who recognize God, and these are the saints, when they come out of the womb, they look to their mother for advice and counsel, education. And he said, this is the same way that we who come out of the womb of the Mother Earth, we need to look to Mother Earth for education and advice and counsel and cherishing. So he tells the story. He says, how strange we are. We have not stopped to attend to what God commanded, to obey him and honor our parents. And we have not been harmonious with, nor have we given fully to what we saw of the virtues of this mother, this world, and her affection towards us and her love. When the Prophet ﷺ said, this world is a vehicle blessing the faithful. On her they reach the fullness of good, and by her they escape from bad. He described her as part of her vigilance over her children, as reminding them about the bad things and helping them escape them, and making the good seem more beautiful to them, and making them passionate for good. Thus she takes them on a journey, and she carries them from a place of bad to a place of good. And this is due to the intensity of her watchful overseeing of what God sent down to her of divine commands called laws. She loves that her children establish the laws so they may be felicitous. This one, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has described her with the finest of qualities, and he deemed her to be a place for the good things. Thus, for the people of watchful awareness, it is appropriate that their commencement in the entrance to this world through the womb of their mother should focus on acquiring these qualities, that they will be aware and watchful of the states of their mother. Indeed, when infants open their eyes, it is only to their mother, and they see only her. Thus, they love her instinctively, and they lean to her more affectionately than they lean towards their father, because they are aware only of the one who cherishes them. And so it is appropriate that they emulate her behaviors. So this is the story of how we are to learn from Mother Earth, the way the child is to learn from their mother. So learning from their mother, learning from Mother Earth. This is how the heart works with things. This is how the heart works with climate change. This is how the heart works with pollution, overcrowding, human problems, societal problems, problems with nature, problems with the climate, problems with weather, all of those things. The mind has one way of looking at things. So the mind is saying, what can I do and what can we do to make things better for me? And the heart says, what can I learn from Mother Earth? What can I learn from my mother? So these are very, very different ways of working. So when we work with the eyes and the heart, this is different from working from the mind and the intellect. And so the mind and the intellect will always be in the same place. We'll always be having these problems. We'll have dissonance. We'll have disharmony. And we have this because the mind is designed to constrain, limit, and constrict. The heart is designed and made to be open and vast and spacious. So, now this is how Ipanarabi works in the Futuhat. He works with helping us speak from the heart to the heart. And he helps us bypass this intellect and bypass this mind. So the intellect is there for one reason. It's to shackle and hobble. And so the word in Arabic for intellect is iqal, aql, and iqal. Aql is this intellect, and iqal are the hobbles of the camel. So those are the hobbles that you put on the camel's feet so that the camel can only walk slowly and can't run off and can't rush and hurt herself or hurt other people. So the reason we have an aql is to slow us down and keep us from running off like crazy and hurting ourselves and hurting other people. So that's why there's an aql. So once we have an aql, we make sure that we don't hurt ourselves, we don't hurt other people, we don't step on people's toes, we don't push into places where we don't belong, we don't take things which aren't ours. That's the realm of the aql, and that's a beautiful, important realm. But the realm of the aql is not so good about understanding who we are and where we came from and what our purpose in life is. That's the realm of the heart. And that's the realm of the heart. And that's the realm of visual imagery, seeing images that show us everything at once instead of having things put into categories and classifications. So images are the way that we understand the whole of things, and the mind is the way we understand categories. And so we need to very much understand that the mind, the intellect helps us in our day-to-day life and how we can not hurt ourselves and not hurt others and not hurt Mother Earth. The heart will be the one to understand why we want to be good to each other, why we want to learn from Mother Earth. And that's to find out our purpose, why we are here in this world. So in our next slide, we'll be looking at, so I mentioned that the Ibn Arabi, he spoke in his poetry about 28, he made 28 poems for girls and women and this freed male slave who he gave this sacred cloak to. He said, I'm giving you the cloak. You have the permission and the authority to convey this message. So he gave that message in the 12,000 pages of the Futuhat, and he gave that message to the girls, the women, and this freed male slave. And so we can now understand that the message must have been conveyed in a very special way, because he didn't sit there and write down 12,000 pages and make them read each page. He didn't say, let's read every page of this 12,000 page Futuhat Makkiyah. But he said he gave her this knowledge. He gave her the secrets. He gave her the mysteries. So now we know that the mind, which is limited, versus the heart, which is unlimited, open, vastly spacious. So if you speak to the heart, you can bring all the data that is out there. And if you speak from the mind will restrict that data and make it narrower and narrower. So here he's challenging us to think with your intellect if you are able to think. And if you're not, then just think with your heart. So verify with your intellect if you are able to think. Our origin is a negative of a negative and a positive of a positive. So now we enter into mathematics, which we will think is the most intellectual of all of these ideas and sciences. But he's using mathematics here to give us a deep, deep truth of where we come from. So this is one to hold with you, take throughout the day and look at it. The matter that is strangest is that I have never not been outside of time. And I am that I am myself, despite this, a new sight in God. Yes, your cherisher is a sight of being, and with whom there is nothing except who, and no past having passed, and no future that is to come. So how can we understand something that is not limited by space and time? Only the heart is going to be able to understand and comprehend and accept and receive truths that are not fixed in space and fixed in time. So, and the story of this entire time, so this he's talking about outside of time here. And now let's talk about the story of time. And I'll read you one more passage. And this is the passage where Ravi will talk about how the one word comes down outside of time and then splits when it enters into space and time. So it splits into two. And these are the 2 feet of the footstool. So this footstool, which is just inside of time and space, has a foot here and a foot here. One of the foot is called Jannat, and the other foot is the sister Jahannam. So there are 2 feet and there are 2 places. So let me read this passage and be listening to the 2 places where the feet go in the footstool, in space, in time. So the 2 divine feet dangle on the footstool when the single Rahman-based word is divided into 2, because the footstool himself, by him emerges visibly the division of the single word. So a word comes and divides into 2. The 2 feet come down to the footstool, and the one foot settles and fixes in a location that the other foot does not settle and fix in. So the footstool is the end point of the 2 settling and fixing in place. The one side is called Jahannam and the other Jannat. These are the 2 sisters, the fire and the garden. Thereafter, there is no place that these 2 feet will transfer to, and these 2 feet do not extend outward except based on the root from which they emerge visibly, and this is Ar-Rahman, the supremely compassionate. So the 2 places always come from their origin, which is the supremely compassionate, the most merciful, the most kind. So the most merciful, most kind, supremely compassionate is the origin for both these 2 feet. Therefore, the 2 provide only merciful kindness, because the endpoint returns to the root virtually, in essence, but not in fact at the moment. So eventually, all things will turn in the circle. The first is mercy, kindness, and goodness, and the end is mercy, kindness, and goodness. The moment you put a dot on the page to draw a circle, you know exactly where the end is. The moment you put your pen into a piece of paper and say, I'm going to draw a circle, you've just written and touched the end of the circle, even before you drew the circle. However, between the commencement and the ending, there is a path. This path being differentiated between the commencement and the ending. And if not for this path, there would be no commencement and no ending. So there is a dot, which is the beginning, and the same dot is the same ending. And yet there's a path, there's a circle that's going to take place. Thus, the journey that the alighting guest takes is between the two. So between the beginning and the end, there's the circle. And any journey is known to involve weariness and distress. So this journey is going to be a difficult one. And this is the journey of our life. There will be distress and there will be weariness. So this is the reason for the emergence of whatever emerges visibly in the world, in this world and the next, and in the membrane, whatever distress manifests. And upon the termination of the sojourn, the traveler's staff is cast off and rest comes in the abode, even in the land which is an evil place to stay in, and even in the land which is an abode of ruin. Even so, there will be a place of rest. By means of the 2 feet, he enriches and he impoverishes. So the divine makes rich and makes poor, enriches and impoverishes. And by means of the 2 feet, he gives death and he gives life. And he makes prosperous and he makes destitute. And by them, he created the 2 mates, male and female. And by them, he abases and he raises exalted. And he gives and he impedes. And he harms and he benefits. If not for the 2 feet, nothing would come to pass in the universe. So we have a dot, which is the beginning, the same dot place is the end, and there is a circle. If not for this being this one word of kindness to be divided into the 2 feet, there would be no circle, there would be no life, there would be no journey. If not for these 2, no presumed partner to him would appear in the universe. And because of there's 2, there's a presumed partner. There's an idea that there's another God. Only that could happen if there's this circle, which is a circle with duality and two-ness. You see, the 2 feet are co-partners, sharing in the descriptive property in the universe, and each one of the 2 has an abode. In her, one of them rules, and each has a family, among whom one of them rules, as God wishes, whatever rule he wishes. We have made a gesture to this and to its distinct details. So our next slide is, so this communication that takes place does not take place from the mind. It takes place in the heart. So the mind says things are worthy or worthless. Things are good, things are bad, things are great, things are horrible. And yet, God does not experience haya, any embarrassment in making a parable, even of a gnat. And then Ibn Arabi explains this. That is, he does not give up making a parable with the lowest and most mean, worthless. Lowest and most worthless according to the ignorant person. So the person who is ignorant will say, this person is poor, ignorant, this person is poor, worthless, and low. This person is high, worthy, and great. But that's what the ignorant person sees, because it is not worthless to God. And how could anyone be worthless who is exactly the indication pointing to God? So each one of these people, each one of these events is an indication to where it comes from. And where it comes from, its origin is kindness, mercy, and goodness. And each one is an indication to that. So if each one indicates something, it indicates that something 100% completely. And so it's perfect. So every indication is a perfect indication of what it is indicating. The one indicated is magnified tremendously by the tremendous magnification of its indicator. So if what you're pointing to is great, then the pointing is also great. If you're pointing to something which is majestic and tremendous, then the pointer is also majestic and tremendous. So if the pointer is majestic and tremendous, we enter into this particular question. Abu Yazid Bastami was asked by what was the most tremendous name of God? And he said, show me the least tremendous name and I will show you the most. And then he meets another teacher in Murcia and he asks, what is the most tremendous name of God? And this teacher throws a rock at the person. And he points to him and says, you are the most tremendous name of God. So this cannot be understood by the mind. This cannot be understood by the intellect. This is something that only the heart knows. And so to know this, to learn this, is to go to our final slide. And to learn this is to receive this in the heart and then to convey it through the heart. And this is something that can be conveyed not to very intellectual great scholars, but to girls, women, and the freed male slave. And so this is how Ibn Arabi says that he successfully conveyed the message by saying, I invested my daughter Safri with a cloak from the family of beautiful names, of beautiful manners. I clothed her with the clothing of God awareness, based on every creation inducing wonder. And I said, my daughter, travel with me on my path and with my course. The course is the law of the prophet, the Hashemi, the Arabi. This is how I clothed her with the cloak, based on every generous, chosen teacher. I declare this, and I am Muhammad ibn al-Arabi. So alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah, such an enlightening descriptions of how Ibn Arabi, as explained by Dr. Eric, interpret this nature. And we can feel it, how important for us in today's situation to really open our heart and eyes to see from the inside, not from the outward external world. So this is very meaningful and very important wisdom that we have to really understand and also try to apply in our life. Okay, so perhaps we will start the Q&A session now. We already received one question from our audience. The first question is from Madam Azrina Zawawi, and she asks, how can symbolism help bridge cultural differences and enhance understanding between people from different cultures?
Right. So what happens is that what we are trained to do as from childhood onwards, and this is what anyone who is on the path, they need to unlearn and untrain themselves. But we are taught from childhood, or what we learn from childhood, is to begin to make sense of the world. But this is making sense of the world with the mind. So we're taught to reduce things to something that's more understandable by the intellect. So if I look at a wall and I'm taught, my brain tells me, look at the wall and say, that's a yellow wall, that's a red wall. But if I really look at the red wall, or the wall that's painted blue or painted yellow, and I look at it carefully, I will realize that there's actually, it's not just a wall that's yellow. I can see the paint marks where the brush went. I can see where there's a little bit of mold here. I can see where some water has come here and made it a little bit paler. I can see that the sun has been hitting this part of the wall and the paint has faded a little bit more. So all of a sudden, I see an incredibly intricate and detailed and complex picture, an image which has almost no end of information and differences and textures. And so I quit going from a yellow wall to a highly textured, highly involved, highly intricate one. And a wall that changes every few minutes, because when the sun moves a little bit differently, the wall has a different color, a different shade. So, but my mind is saying, you're not going to be able to survive this world if every time you see a wall, you sit there and spend 2 hours looking at all of the colors and the shades and the textures and the dots and the little points and all of these things. We're going to have to go faster. You're going to have to say, that's a yellow wall, move along. And so we end up learning how to do that. So when it comes to culture, and as you were saying, when it comes to human beings, we end up doing the same thing. We have to very quickly say, instead of looking at this person with all their complexities and differences and all of their intricacies, I've got to get a single category for this person. You know, someone I like, someone I don't like, someone who's this, someone who's that. I have to give them a label, and I have to use that label so I can move along and continue. So what we realized then is that, as our professor mentioned, is that we need to then begin to look not from the outward, but from the inward. And if we look from the inward, we're going to go slower, because then when I meet someone, instead of saying, this is a yellow wall, this is an X person, this is a Y person, I'm going to say, let me see what this person is doing right now. And at that moment, I might notice very many things that my mind has never seen, but my eye can see. And then I'll say, wow, this is very interesting. I can't give a label to this person. So Ibn Arabi uses the example, this one here, to how to break these cultural habits and how to see as things truly are and how to see another person as things truly are. He talks about Al-Hajjaj, who you may know was a tyrant and oppressive, cruel person, horrible ruler. And at the time, the people who were very spiritual Muslims, who were very much into the spirit of ideas, they were special people. So they were asking themselves, is it lawful for me to pray behind someone who's such a horrible person, who's done such terrible things? Is my prayer going to be accepted if I pray behind this person? So they had the big debate about that for years. And Ibn Arabi, who came probably a few centuries after that, he said, actually, the question is quite simple. And they really wasted a lot of time arguing about these things. He says, let's look at Hajjaj. What happened to him in the past? Allah alone knows. God alone knows. I don't know what happened to him in the past. Maybe some horrible thing happened to him, and that's why he's so angry, and that's why he's so cruel. Maybe this happened to him. Maybe his child died, and that hurt him so much he couldn't be kind to anyone anymore. We don't know what happened to him in the past. And he says, as for the future, we don't know what God is going to do with him in the future. Maybe he becomes the most generous human being who walked the planet Earth. Maybe he does this, maybe he does that. We don't know what happens in the future with him. So I can't put a category and a label on his past, and I can't put a category and a label on his future. All I have is the present. And if in the present, he gave the testimony of faith, and he did ablutions and washed himself correctly and led the prayer correctly, then he's your imam, he's your leader. Because at the moment, that's what he is. So Ibn Arabi is telling us, this is why he says the Sufi is the child of the moment. We only know at the moment what someone is and who someone is. So when I speak to someone, they speak to me, we converse. I only know who they are at that moment. I can't put a label and say, you've always been this way, and therefore I'm going to continue to label you this way. And I can't say, I'm worried that you're going to become this way in the future, so I will label you another way. I can only do moment by moment by moment. So this means that the person of this stature and of this station is someone who is looking at the wall and saying, it's not a yellow wall, it's not a red wall, it's a wall with tremendous complexity and intricacy. And if I look at that wall, I end up having a lot of, care for it. I attend to it. It's very interesting. A yellow wall is not that interesting. A red wall is not that interesting. But a wall with this texture, that's an interesting one. And then when you look at a human being, you can't say it's a yellow wall, it's a red wall anymore. You can only say, wow, this is a human being. And there's a lot to love here. And so this changes the way we look at the world.
Thank you. So Dr. Eric, we proceed. We have some other questions, very interesting question. And from Mr. Fakhri Rahman, he asks, how can visual language be used to challenge and change cultural and societal norms? But before that, perhaps you can elaborate. Another question from Nur Iman, what are some common symbols used in intercultural communication, and how might their meanings vary across different cultures? Okay, we try to address these two questions first.
So I think what Well, it might be interesting. So when we talk about this illustrated guide to hypnotherapy, actually, we don't use the concept of symbol, and and the word symbol can be a very intellectual and mind-based idea. So symbol is so I mean in the worst case scenario, I'll give you a symbol, let's say like a flag. A flag typically is a symbol. And that symbol will have all of this information behind it, all this cultural baggage behind it. And it's meant to elicit certain things from you. It's made to, you want to be patriotic or this or that, other things. So flags are an example of a symbol, which is very much intellectual and mind-based. It's not an eye. The eye-based, so if someone with an eye-based, looking from their heart, looking from the eye, when they see a flag, they won't say that's a flag of this country. They'll say, oh, this is a very interesting piece of cloth. And it has these kinds of weaving. It's been woven in a very dense weaving here. And some of the strings are this color and other strings are other colors. So they won't even see the symbol. They'll only see the flag. They'll see the fabric. So, and one of the great comedians, George Carlin, who passed a while ago, George Carlin used to say that he does about symbols. He said, I don't like symbols, and I leave the symbols to the symbol-minded people, simple-minded, symbol-minded people. So when I hear the word symbol, if I'm thinking of this idea of image, which then stands for other things, then I see that very much as a mind intellect thing. But if you're looking at images, that is different, because an image comes to you and you have to see it fresh. So a symbol is trying to make you see lots of things and you don't see it freshly. But an image is something that you see and you have to deal with it. You have to look at it carefully. The same way with the cards. If there's a 10 of hearts and the hearts is actually made in a different color, then you have to be able to see it. Oh, that's not just 10 of hearts as a symbol, or the Queen of Hearts as a symbol. That's actually, I have to look at the image and I have to look at the details. So the best images are ones that you haven't seen before and that they cause you to look at them for the first time differently. And so in the illustrated guide, for instance, we have images here which have been changed so that they will not be familiar. And you'll look at them and say, I need to look at this carefully and attend to it. So symbols are not necessarily helpful ways for us to attend to things, because what we want to do is look at other people and look at ourselves with new eyes, with fresh eyes, and not with categories and classifications. And so if I can challenge someone and say, you're expecting me to look a certain way and I'm going to look a little bit differently, that will be a way of then entering into a new mode of let me look freshly and see what you really are, who you are.
Interesting. And then, Dr. Eric, we still have the following questions from Nick Zakia and also from Aina. First, from Nick Zakia. She wants to know, how has visual language changed over time and what impact has this had on cultural and societal norms? And Aina Halim asks, how do visual symbols contribute to the formation and reinforcement of cultural stereotypes?
Yeah, so to look at the last one, the symbols will be a way of reproducing and reinforcing cultural stereotypes. So symbols are a very fast way of reinforcing and saying, so I look at a symbol and I have 100 ideas behind it. And so those 100 ideas keep coming with that symbol. And so, and that's why symbols are used in human governance and human society to enforce and to reinforce certain things. Images are different. So images are always new and always fresh. And so, and how do these images change over time? Well, that's what the artist does. The artist is someone who does the same. It looks like the same from the outside, but it's actually fresh and new, and it causes you to look at things differently each time. So the artist takes a picture of something, and instead of representing it, is actually creating something. So representative art or representing is saying this picture of an apple represents an apple. And that doesn't really help us get anywhere because that's like the symbol. It just says, oh, that's a picture of an apple. And it's either a good picture of an apple or it's a bad picture of an apple. But it doesn't make me look at the apple. It doesn't make me think, what does an apple really look like? So the art that comes and it changes all the time. And that's how artists are inside their time, their zeitgeist, their particular spirit of their time. These artists, when they show me a picture and I say, what is it? And I look close, I said, well, I think it's an apple, but it's not like an apple I've ever seen before. And then I realized that apples are not just red. Apples are actually have all these textures in them. Depends on when it came off of the tree. It depends, is it still on the tree? All of these things. And I causes my eye to look carefully and to look as if for the first time at this thing, which I then label as an apple. So artists who do this are so from the outside, you might say the artist is just painting something. The artist is just drawing something. The artist is just making this sound. But when you what they're really doing is they're asking you to listen and see as if for the first time. And this is one reason why music is so effective, because the music has no past and has no future. So it's not the same. So if someone gives me the score of a musical piece and I pick the score up and I read the notes, that's one thing. I say, well, those notes came first and those came later. And so I can read music in this way and as a category and but I'm not really hearing the music. But if I listen to music, the moment the note plays, I forgot what that note was because that's now in the past. All I hear is the next note. And then I don't know what's coming next in the future. So I'm exactly like Ibn Arabi says, that's the way you are with Hajjaj. What happened in the past is gone. We don't know what made it there. What's happening in the future, we don't know what it will be. We only have the present. So music is one of the ways that artists help us say, stop everything, quit looking at things from the past and say, well, I always think of these people this way. And quit thinking of the future. Well, I only think this is going to happen. I'm worried about this in the future. I need to control this for the future. And just listen to the melody. And so listen to the melody. And that's actually then a nice metaphor for how we work with each other, our own lives and each other's lives. We're asking ourselves, what's the melody? What music am I playing? And so can you see my melody, not looking at what I did in the past, not looking what I may do in the future, but right now, who I am, what I'm doing. And can I look at you that way? So can I hear your music? So that's how, in a way, these images change over time. The artist, which is such a blessing to the society, to the world, is an artist who's helping you see something fresh for the first time.
Very interesting interpretation about the music. We have to listen to the melody of the present time now, not in the future and not in the past. So I try to finish the questions that we received from the online audience first, because I believe that our audience in the boardroom will also get opportunity to ask questions to Dr. Eric. We have an interesting question from Prof. Siti. He asked, could you relate the visual language to the Jungian archetypes that transmitted as universal shared ancestral memories across humanities?
Thank you. Yes, I think Jung was trying to reach these with his idea of archetypes and trying this the collective consciousness that all human beings have something that's universal in them. And what's universal is not what their brains come up with, what their minds come up with, but what's happening subconsciously and in this unconscious. So that is the source that we're looking at. What is this source that we can draw upon that and reach to that place? And so some of the people who work with Jung's ideas, for instance, Henri Corbin, coming with the idea of creative imagination. So this is this entire amazing idea of the creative imagination. It's the idea that somewhere inside of us, there is a common human place, a source. And if we can reach that source and touch that source, then we are we will find a common humanity. We'll begin to see ourselves not as separate and as alienated and as isolated, but we'll see ourselves as humanity. And from Ibn Arabi, the way he looks at it, he says we will see ourselves as humanity created by the divine. And that when we're outside of time, we will see that this humanity and this circle that we went through, all these lives that we went through, were images, reflections in the mirror when the divine looked in the mirror and saw us. So this is what we want to reach into. And it seems to be very clear that Jung was wanting us to find this source. And Henri Corbin, studying Ibn Arabi, was saying this is where that source is. And if that is the case, of course I think it is, that can be conveyed to the 28 girls and women and the freed male slave. And that can be conveyed, whereas writing is there as a placeholder, which you have to know first before you can understand. So that's the difference between outward transmission and inward transmissions.
Thank you, Dr. Eric. And we try to respond to the Riza Bustami, who says, dissonance reminds me of Balkis. Two instances. First, when her throne was transferred and she was confused. The second one, the crystal floor, which she thought was water. So what is it, Ibn Arabi's view on this? Thank you.
Well, so Ibn Arabi discusses this verse, the verses from the Quran, and discusses this idea, this image, this story, but it's very different from what many commentators do. First of all, for him, Bilqis is the one who understands these things completely. So she's not confused, and she's not perplexed, and she's not learning something or wrong about anything. She already knows. And in fact, she said, we have been given knowledge. We have been given this knowledge. And so she says, Ka'anahu huwa. It is as if it is it. And so Ka'anahu huwa is also when we have Jibril alayhi salam, Gabriel gave three teachings, one about Islam, one about Iman, one about Ihsan. And so Ihsan is to see as if you see who. And so this is Bilqis is teaching us from way back then. Bilqis is teaching us to see that this throne, it is as if it is her throne. Because everything, there is nothing which is stable and unchanging. So when she sees the throne, she says, it's as if it's the throne. That doesn't mean she's confused. She's saying that throne is not the same as the throne that was there a moment ago. And there'll be a new throne in another moment, and it will be a different throne. So everything is different. Every throne is a new throne. Every throne that she looks at is a new creation. And the people are in confusion about the new creation. But Bilqis was not confused. She said, it as if it is it. It is as if it is it. So this is the greatest wisdom that there is. This is the secret, that we look at the world, we look at the throne, and we know that it is as if it is it.
Alhamdulillah, we get very insightful descriptions from the question address that have been deliberated by Dr. Eric. So now, we would like to listen question from the audience in the boardroom. Yes, please, Puan Liza.
Yes, I have one very simple question. Some of us tend to approach situation from a purely intellectual perspective. How can one cultivate the ability to listen to their emotion and see things from a more heart-centered perspective?
Yeah, so how can we have the mind start to fall asleep so that the heart can wake up and begin to act and speak and perform and to interact and to receive? So it was a teaching for me when we were able to go to Alhambra. This is the famous place in Granada. And the guide was a very interesting guide. And she knew so much. And you could tell that she was very irritated over the years of having to give guides to all the Europeans and they're being so ignorant about Islam. And so you could tell that she really, and then in her own country, in Spain, there's a great resistance against their sort of Islamic background or their traditions. And so you could tell that she was very irritated about all of those things. And so when she came to our group, which was a group that's very open and interested in Islam, and many Muslims among us in that group, she really could say, let me just tell you what I really want to say. And so she would take us to the one hall where you have this huge ceiling, and there are thousands of calligraphy statements of phrases like la ilaha illallah, and all of these phrases are calligraphy all over these walls and all these patterns. And there would be a pattern and another pattern and another pattern, and you just go on and on and on. And she says, do you know why there's so many patterns here? And we said, no, I mean, there really is thousands. If you have a tile and you have thousands and thousands of tiles, he said, you know why these patterns are here? And we said, no, tell us why. And she said, these patterns are here to make the mind bored. The mind is going to say, there's the pattern. I see it again. There's that same tile. There's another tile. There's another tile. There's 1,000 tiles. I'm bored. I'm going to sleep. And so then the mind goes to sleep and the heart says, what's here? And then sees each of these tiles as individual, beautiful, intricate tiles. So instead of seeing the wall as yellow or red, suddenly the wall has all of these intricacies and all these textures. So there is what we look for is those sessions and those sounds and those remembrances and those repetitions and those sounds of sacred text and of sacred art. All of those, when we immerse ourselves in there, they are designed precisely to let the mind move to one side so that the heart can begin to see for the first time freshly. And then once you get into that routine and practice, then you're able to go there often. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. And so sometimes, for instance, if you have 5 times prayer, that's a way of putting yourself into a situation where your alpha waves, the intellect, starts closing down and the theta waves start coming up, because you're not using your brain when you're praying, you're using something else. And so if you have that routine, that practice, then you get trained to say, how can I be in that state all the time or more often? How can I not be always thinking alpha waves, but actually thinking with my brain very much slower and very much more receptive to what reality is? So that's the practice that we have. And so there's practices that are all throughout. And that's what the guides throughout the human history, the guides, that's what they bring to us. That's the light they bring. They give us practices that do these things so that you will then learn how to always be in that state. So that's the sacred practices. And those can't be, you may have heard from Saitas and Nasser and others about what sacred means. And they'll tell us that sacred is that which has been given by a guide. Someone gave that to us and told us that and taught us that. And it can't be gotten by the intellect. So the intellect cannot create a method of entering into the theta waves of the brain. The intellect can't do that. Just the way the intellect can't create a new religion or new rituals. It can't do that. So that's why we use what the guides have given us to say, these are the practices which train me to hear with the heart, to let the brain move from alpha waves to theta waves.
Inshallah. We not only see from our heart, but we should also hear and listen from the heart. So deep, Dr. Eric. So any other questions from the floor? Yes, Prof. Yes.
Congratulations on a wonderful talk. I just want to make a small kind of observation. I think our audience out there are quite sophisticated in terms of the intended message for this talk. So alhamdulillah for that. Just to expand a little bit on what my colleague here has said just now, with regards to how to listen with the heart. I think this aspect is not being emphasized in education. I don't mean education as in the Ministry of Education or curriculum of education now institutions, but I think in general. So I think this is where individuals, I can't go anywhere else. I think we're going back to the individuals, must take notes and do whatever is within their means. Yeah? That's just one of my general observations. Secondly, I want to say, not on my behalf precisely, but perhaps there are people out there who feel that they are a Sufi of sorts, but they are immersed in life's complications and complexity. Yeah. So would some pointers to how they should be helpful. For example, if you say when you do fikr thinking using the brain, you should also do zikr. Remember it, yeah? Would that be a good start? Yeah. Secondly, I take the point that Sufi is a child of the moments. Yeah, you do not, and I think it's very much in line with true traditions, which is you do not be judgmental on other people because you don't really know where they come from or where they're going. And if everything comes from the Almighty anyway, and it's also part of the tradition, which is often forgotten, then you're bringing back your clever brain to sort of make analysis and so on and so on. Which brings me to the next question. When you are, when people are in positions of critical decision making, for example, I suppose they should take things as they are, like they come into office and they've got certain SOPs and regulations and whatnot. So take it as it is, for instance, and do your best with it, with your values being your drivers. Your values as in your, your sense of right and wrong, halal and haram. And finally, this issue of intercultural, cross-cultural communications and all of that, there's a lot of chauvinism, isn't it? Like it would be my view that is most important, as opposed to other views. But you have to be extremely careful here, be politically correct, I suppose, depending on where and how you are. Is it sufficient to say you can start with positive chauvinism? What do I mean by that? I mean, like, learn to know your own tradition, your own culture, your own civilization, and understand why it is important for you. So then there is a kind of heart knowledge there, right? So when you have this heart knowledge, only then can you understand why the other person is so chauvinistic. And the conversation has to occur because then the two hearts have to talk to each other. And only hearts don't tell lies, right? So when one heart sees that the other heart has a point, there will be easier mutual acceptance, one. And then the heart that actually wins, quote unquote, will not be saying, there you are, I told you. I mean, like, there won't be that degree or that kind of element that brings conflict and chaos and whatnot. And finally, I guess the take-home message here is be patient, sabar. Be patient. And this is a commodity that's very difficult to find. The world is supposed to be over-intellectualized, but at the same time, it's not, bringing solutions. So those people who do care, I suppose, Sufi or non-Sufi, they just have to keep at it. Yeah, so I just hope that our series of talks with IAS, the kind input from Dr. Eric and also Dr. Lishan, will help Center for Civilization Dialogue and IAS in furthering its message of peace and hope for the future. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. I think education and the intellect is very much based on fear and the lack. That there's something lacking, and so that the student comes into an educational setting, and they have fear because they know that they don't have the answers, and they're told that they are lacking something, that there's something that you don't have and that you're going to get now, and the question, and you'll be graded and evaluated on whether you get it or not. And so that's definitely a place of fear and of lack. And the heart is quite different. The heart, and so you cannot be open to new ideas and see things freshly if you're in a state of fear, and if you're in a state of thinking, I'm not enough, I'm incomplete, I'm lacking something. So we had when I was a kid, I was in an open classroom, so that had no structure at all. And so, and when I created a school in New Mexico, and I created this for just regular people, regular students. And so one of the things that we found that they enjoyed so much is that when they would come into a situation and we would say, read a poem or read a passage, and there's no right or wrong answer, and there's nothing that you don't know before you read this passage, that when we read this passage, we're going to ask questions like, what do you think about that? How does that make you feel? Have you ever felt something like that? So they already had the answers, so there was no feeling that they lacked anything. And there was no fear because they said, well, all the answers are already inside, and they're not going to ask me something I don't know. We're not asking them, how does someone else feel about that? We're asking how you feel about that. So then we could realize that that's what education needs to be. That's hard education. It's when you enter a classroom or a setting of education and you have no fear and you have no feeling that you're lacking something, that you're missing something. You walk in and you say, this is going to be a time for me to access my heart, understand my feelings, and begin to ask questions about myself. I wonder how I feel about this. I wonder what I think about this. And so all the answers are already in here. So I don't have to wait for someone to unload these answers into me and just take a bucket of truth and throw it into me, or data and facts. So that's a different, very, very different way of education. And the education, that's the way, that's when people start speaking about education is in the world, not in a classroom in a particular setting. So education is a crucial way of finding out what we really are wanting. Do we want to train people to be good workers in a factory, to have some initiative but not too much initiative? Or do we want people to say, I wonder how they can be full human beings? And to be full human beings, you start without fear and without saying that you're incomplete. So second, the idea of this affector and victor, that's a way that the language itself gives us, the Arabic language itself gives us this Hanuman, this similar sounding one, that there's the thinking and there's the remembering, they're two different ones. And so that is a beautiful way of saying, because we don't, the thinking is not the same as remembering. So thinking and with the intellect, there's something that you need to get, so that the teacher has it or some wise person has it, and you need to get it from them because you're lacking something. And zikr is remembering what you already know. So it's a completely different place. And so there's no fear because you already know these things. You're just remembering them. And
like begin the intention, the well and do.
Yeah.
Then the remembering part is the next, the intention.
Right.
Which links to the good values that.
Right. And so these are the remembrance of divine names. Those are the remembrance that everything that's happening is a divine name that's happening before me. And everything is a divine name that's playing out before me. And when it comes to intercultural, interfaith, all of those, it's the word that I would go to now is shackling is an interesting word here, because Junaid says that our knowledge, this is shackled to the book and the sunnah. So our knowledge, this is shackled to the book and the sunnah. And shackled here is this literal muqayyada, is shackled, is tied up to. So what he's saying is that we're speaking from the heart. We're speaking from this special face. And that's where our experiences are. We love the divine. We love the Almighty. This is who we are speaking of every time we speak. And this is our beloved, and we are the lovers. We are the lovers of the divine, and the divine is the beloved. And this is who we are. But then he says, but this knowledge, we shackle it to the book and the Sunnah. We'll speak of it only using verses from the Quran and only using hadith from the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So he's saying that that's what we are. We're speaking from the heart, but we'll shackle it to the book and the Sunnah for you, for your sake, because you might not be able to understand us otherwise. So you want to hear the words from the ayat of the Quran, you want to hear the hadith from the Sunnah. We'll use those words, those languages to explain and describe and elucidate what we're having from our hearts. So, the way I do, I shackle myself to Ibn Arabi, so the Futuhat. So everything I say is telling is from the Futuhat. Everything I say, I can give you the verse and the line in the Futuhat where it comes from. And the reason I do that is because I don't ask you to say, accept what I'm saying. You know, I've got good ideas and I've got some not so good ideas, and so don't accept me just because I'm saying it. This is what Ibn Arabi says, and Ibn Arabi is saying this, and so you have a right to say, where are these ideas coming from? Are these your personal ideas, or are those experiences from someone who is guided, someone who got this guidance? And then for Muslims, Muslims can say, okay, so you're a Muslim, and I need to listen to you. I want to listen to you and tell me what you think. But can you give it to me in the language which I understand? So can you give it to me, the verse in the Quran where this is talking about? So you're talking about that the origin is kindness and goodness. And you're saying the origin is kindness and goodness, and we started from the goodness and the kindness, and we're going to go back to the goodness and the kindness. And in the middle of that, we'll go through our life, but all of our life will be oriented towards kindness and goodness. Can you explain that to me? Is it just your idea? And I'll say, well, if you want to hear it from the book and the Sunnah, then hear it this way, that we sent you as a mercy and a goodness to all of the worlds. So we sent you as a mercy and goodness to all of the worlds. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, the time when I came back to its origin. So those two, that's a hadith, and this is from the book, the Sunnah. So I can use that language. I can shackle this heart language into this language. And then that's good for me to do that when I'm speaking to people who don't have, they don't shackle themselves to the Quran or the Sunnah. They don't understand the Quran or the Sunnah. They have another way of thinking. So what I do is I say, here's the way I speak of it from the heart. And then it goes to the book and the Sunnah this way. And then you tell me what you hear. You tell me what you shackle yourself to. And let's talk heart to heart, being completely upfront and transparent, saying, this is how my language is formed. Because in my life, when I came to hear the Quran, I said, this is these words, these verses, they inform me and they give me life and they give me goodness. And so that's why I shackle myself to these verses. But let's talk heart to heart, knowing where I'm shackled to.
Thank you. Came from the Zoom, we still have questions that Mr. Riza Bustami wants you to elaborate more on the second question relating to the Balqis, the crystal floor, which she thought was water. So what is Ibn Arabi's view on this?
So the crystal floor that looked like water, this is the question of what things look like. And so another example of this is Ulaym's pillar. And that's the story when there was a person who had this great visual force. So he had this great internal energy where he could make you see things. And so he sat with a group of people, and they were in a mosque which had these marble pillars. And suddenly Ulaym said, look at this golden pillar. And everyone looked at the pillar and said, oh my God, it's gold. There's a gold, this pillar is made out of gold. And then suddenly, then he would say, no, it's a marble pillar. And they would say, oh no, it is marble. It's a marble pillar. It's made out of gold. And then Ulaym said, actually, this mosque is being held up by these great figures, these great human beings. And they said, oh yeah, we can see the great human beings who are holding up this mosque. And so Ulaym said, the lesson is, it's that column holding up the mosque. It is and it isn't a great human being. It is and it isn't a piece of marble, and it is and it isn't gold. It's whatever you see. So what is its reality? Its reality is something that is beyond mineral or human or any or plant like a tree. The reality is that there is a pillar holding up this mosque. The visualization is I can see a marble, I can see gold, I can see a human being. And so the same way with the crystal floor on the water, it isn't water and it isn't a floor. It is water and it's not water. It's a floor and it's a crystal floor and it's not a crystal floor. It's whatever is you are seeing at that moment. And then you see at that moment that it's a new creation. The next moment it will be something different. The throne is as if it is the throne because that throne is going to change again in another moment. And that's the Khalq al-Jadid, the new creation. So if I want to shackle myself to the book here, that's the Khalq al-Jadid, which most of them are in confusion about. And they're in confusion about the new creation because the new creation is changing at every moment. And then to handle that, we say, our minds say, well, let me handle this new creation and say, there's not a new creation. It's the same all the time. There's one throne and it's going to be marble or it's gold. It's crystal or it's water. It can't be both. It can't be neither.
Thank you, Dr. Eric. So now we are going to have our last question from the Facebook. Mr. Abu Bakar said, Assalamualaikum, Dr. Eric. What is your perspective on the modern method of mental illness treatment that focuses more on brain and neurology? What is the possible way forward if we were to adopt the heart-based solution for mental illness, which has become a social phenomenon of the post-pandemic era? Yes, very important.
Yeah, I've been fascinated to find that so many. I've been meeting people, and they are in the mental health field, and they're telling me that after pandemic that there's a real increase in mental illnesses, especially among young people, and this is a very serious issue, and it was going to change societies. So the way that the imagery that we've been speaking about. The imagery is a way to look at something and realize that I'm not looking at a marble column or a gold column or a human being column. And so if we're looking at the idea of trauma and things that have happened to us in the past. So when something has happened to someone in the past and they have a traumatic thing, and so they want to heal from that trauma, this particular understanding of images is to say that that trauma is not to be labeled or categorized. So if we label it and categorize it, then it's fixed in time and it's fixed in our brain and it's fixed in our mind, and it's always going to be there. So if someone is saying, I was a victim of this, and they labeled it that way, then they will always be a victim of that, and they will not be able to find healing from it. But if they're able to go back to the place and change the interpretation of it, that change of interpretation will give them healing. And so that's why we want to say, so if I say that this marble column, I saw that and it did something to me. If I can go back and say, it's not marble, it could also be gold, it could also be a human being, then I've changed the way I see this and healing becomes possible. So we do know that healing takes place when old things are broken down. And that's why healing is difficult. And that's why we entering to the path of this path of self-realization to understand who we are, why we're here. It's a difficult path because it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be difficult. And it's difficult to go back to a time of trauma and then to say, I'm going to see that with a different picture, a different image. And so, but that's the way healing takes place. And so we need the encouragement of people. Some people will need to have medications which will help them do that. Some people will need medication and counselors, people who love them and care for them are going to say, I'm going to help you find these things. So there'll always be these combinations and necessary processes for us to go back to places which are informing us and break them, give a new image to them, and then go from there. And so this is how Nelson Mandela he was asked, "What have you forgiven the jailers? Have you forgiven the people who put you in jail?" And he said, "Yes, I've forgiven them. And I had to forgive them, otherwise I'd still be back in the jail." So if he always was saying, those people did me an injustice, they were wrong to me, and they were wrong to him, and they did do him an injustice. But he said, rather than stay with the injustice, I'm going to change the image, and I'll forgive them, and I'll move on with my life. And so that was the healing that Nelson Mandela found. And in all of our lives, we can do that. And I do think that much of that we see when someone is having a problem with mental health issues, I do think many times it will be from a trauma. There will be times when the medications are absolutely required. There'll be times when it's more of maybe more of a spiritual issue, but in every case, psychosomatic, psyche and the body always hand in hand. There's nothing that happens to my body which doesn't influence my psyche. There's nothing that happens to my psyche that doesn't influence my body. So working together, this is how we find our healing. And we all need our healing, and we all need to begin to concentrate and attend to, especially the young people who are needing this healing, are coming into a place of they're having such difficulty, such trouble finding encouragement and hope for the future. And so this is especially, I think all of society has to begin to focus on the needs of the young people who are not getting what is so much necessary for them, and the care and the concern that they have, so they can find out who they are, why they're here, and where they get their energy from.
Inshallah, Alhamdulillah. Now we have come to the end of this session, and I believe that all of us have benefited a lot from the sharings that Dr. Eric have presented to all of us today. So perhaps 1 minute for concluding remarks, Dr. Eric.
Yeah, so I think this has been an example of the kind of education that's required, because I'm not telling you something you don't know, and these are all things that you have inside yourself. And so what I may be doing, what I can be offering, is I'm giving more words and more languages and more images, which can affirm and confirm and also support the things that you already know and you already want to be doing. And that's how, for me, that's what I gained from studying Ibn Arabi, that he gives me words and languages and images that reach to what I already know, but give me ways to say, take this and apply it today. This is something that can be done today. And so it's an instruction for how to live my life. And it's when I get great strength from. And so, and I've noticed that this is one of the things that the past few years, and this is the Futuhat project that we're working on, is to convey these messages. It's what I always find is that someone will say, this speaks to me because it's something I've been thinking about and my heart has been wondering about, and it speaks to me, and I now see things, and it gives me clarity and it gives me strength. And so then I realized, okay, that's why I was saying whatever I was saying. It was not to give data, information, and some kind of narrow definition of knowledge. It was to give encouragement for everyone, to us, to reach into our special face, reach into the source of where all of our energy comes from, all of our aspirations are. And so if I've been able to speak that way, then it's been a success. And to remind everyone there's nothing lacking. And so we had that one slide, you are the most tremendous name of the divine. And because you indicate the divine, you are the most tremendous name. So there's nothing that you need to become. Your imperfection is your perfection. So with that, when I hear that my imperfections are my perfection, that gives me a lot of strength. I don't have to worry about things anymore. And I say, well, let's just go forth.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah, we are so empowered and also very blessed with all the insights that you have shared with us. The all imperfection is the perfection itself. So it's never too late for us to start to begin the new journey with the correct perspective. Yeah, we should begin to contemplate more using our heart. So with that, I thank you, Dr. Eric, on behalf of the organizers, University Malaya Center for Civilizational Dialogue, and also International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, for you to being in these two sessions on this very special lecture. So again, I would also like to thank you all the beautiful people who have joined these sessions, and we hope to see you again. And if you like to have more sessions and also topics related to the Futuhat, please visit the website, thefutuhat.com. So Dr. Eric will engage with you throughout the website. With that, I thank you everyone, and inshallah we meet again. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.